Okay, I think we're live now. Let me make sure we got all this set up. Or I'm gonna get hit with some sound here. Okay, so I think we're live. Let me double check, make sure we got sound. Yeah, it looks like we got sound. All right, so welcome. Thursday night, streaming live at the Game Institute. I just walked in the door and had enough time to fire up the computer, so I'm stalling a little bit while my computer runs through its usual warm-up stuff here. But today's subject, our little meeting, is going to be on the user preferences, and this little talk, a little bit different than the past ones we've had. This one's not part of the curriculum. This one's just one that was a question that I got. And I got about 3 emails about a month ago. It was a little while ago. They all just kind of got bunched together. But different students from different places asking me what my user preferences were set to in Blender and why they would see certain menu items were different on my version of Blender than theirs. So I kind of put this in here as something we could talk about, just because, well, first of all, it's Thursday night, so I like to put stuff on a Thursday night that I don't have to get a lot of things set up on my computer, because I'm usually walking right in the door after work. But also, it just seemed like a pretty legit thing to talk about. And if you've used Blender, or even Maya, Max, any other program, the user preferences tend to get forgotten about. They don't get talked about much. But a lot of times, if you dig around in the user preferences when you're learning the program, you can set up the program to be a little bit more friendly to you and kind of work for you the way that you like to work. Or maybe you're coming from another program, like I was originally. I was coming over from Max when I was learning Blender. But you know, all the different tool sets and menus and naming and keystrokes and everything, that stuff takes a long time to learn. So if you can set the program up to be a little bit more friendly to you, I think you'll be a little bit more happy in the long run. And the truth is, you know, it's just you using the program. So set it up the way that you want. So yeah, we'll go ahead and talk. Also, and I know I always mention this, but the YouTube channel, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, the chat is turned off there. You can watch, that's fine. It is live. But if you want to chat, then you need access to the, you know what, I'll tell you in a second. Just a second. I want to see, I haven't checked today. Let's check and see if we have any action on the Game Institute site real quick. Nope, doesn't look like it yet. So I'm on the beta site for Game Institute. So some of the Game Institute students, you guys have access to it. If you want to jump in the classroom, maybe you're over on YouTube, you can jump over the classroom and you can chat. Also, for all my friends out there on Skype, feel free to go ahead and Skype. And you know what? I don't even have Skype on. I didn't turn it on. So you might be Skyping me right now. I'll turn it on. We're going to get the Skype load up screen here in a second. Sorry, but I probably have people getting angry with me on Skype right now. And by the way, with Skype, just use the text on it. I've tried the video chats before on this, and it completely confuses me. I can't video chat and work all at the same time. That is something that has been requested, the old video chat, while I do streaming. We'll maybe tackle that down the road. I'm not good at massive multitasking. Okay, so let's talk about the user preferences. I've got this asset here just so there's something to show you the user preferences when we get to it. Plus, I just didn't want you staring at a blank screen. That's our little cart that we made live back when we were making assets. All right, so let's go to user preferences. In Blender, it's under File, User Preferences, or the always popular Control-Alt-U. And there are our user preferences. You can also get to this window just by clicking here, and they are right here. And you can just change the whole window to user preferences if you really want to. I don't usually do it that way. I don't usually have the window preferences open very long, but we'll get this guy open here so we can take a look at it. So in Blender, you get a bunch of choices here. Like all programs, you get a bunch of choices. The ones that I tend to focus on the most is how the viewport reacts to my mouse movements, how my mouse operates, and then the add-ons. Those are the main ones. Also, we'll look at, there's some system settings that can help you out. We'll look at those too. And of course, any of this stuff you could look up online. That's always seems to be how I have to figure it out. But I'll show you my favorite settings. So I thought first we'd go over here to input. Oh, there we go, input. And Blender gives you some choices here that if you were just learning Blender, you might want to look at. The first one is probably the most talked about thing over here in the preferences, and that's the old, do you want to live with Blender's fairly weird alternate mouse clicking world, or do you want to bail out towards 3ds Max or Maya? Now, keep in mind, no program can just take the keystroke from one program and just plop them into another. That's just, these are big, heavy-duty programs with tons and tons of keystrokes. So my feeling is, and what I recommend to the students that are learning Blender, is let's say you came over from 3D Max or Maya, but we'll use Max as an example. And you're really proficient with the Max keystrokes, so things like moving around in the viewport, the transform keys. I mean, those are biggies in Max. And you want to just do all that in Blender. It's just not going to really work that way. You're going to carry over some of the keystrokes. A lot of the mouse and viewport control keystrokes will come over if you want to set it to 3ds Max. But most of the keystrokes aren't. And when I first started Blender, I tried this out. I'm not going to click on it now because I don't want to mess things up. But I first tried working with it in that way, and I bailed on it fairly quickly because my job is to make videos and training, and you know, it's not very functional if I'm clicking on one button and then trying to remember what the old button was that did that action. Anyways, that wasn't going to work. So I bailed on it, and I used the Blender preset buttons for the most part. We're going to get to that here in a second. But if you want to give that a try, there are your presets for Max and Maya. Blender's obviously the default. So you can set that up. Next guy, I'm going to skip around here a little bit, is down here with this one. Select with. Now, I had two conversations last week. It was just kind of happen chance. I ran into two guys that used Blender. Both of them were good friends of mine. I didn't even know they actually used Blender. But they had found out I was doing some of this training for Game Institute and doing videos and so forth. And so they made a point of coming over and talking to me. The first thing one of them asked me was, are you a right or a left mouse button user in Blender? The reason he mentioned that is the default setting in Blender for we'll call it a selection click, or the main button that you use in Blender, is the right mouse button. As far as I know, it's the only program that does that. Now, you can look it up, but the Blender community is very possessive of their right mouse button clicking. And so I wouldn't go mouthing off about how strange that is. But I am dysfunctional with it. I'm so used to the way other programs work and that's just me, which is a left mouse button, your index finger basically on the mouse, is what you use to select with in most programs. Again, the Blender community has all sorts of reasons why they like that. There's a whole long history / science of why Blender chose to make it that way. I gave it a try, and I gave it a good try. I tried for probably 2 months to make the right mouse clicking button work, and I gave up. I I just couldn't do it. Part of the problem is some of my days are spent teaching at other places. I use other programs. I come home. I've got keystrokes in my head already. It was confusing to start with, and trying to alternate that mouse button thing was never going to work. So I switched to this left mouse button, and I have never looked back and have been much, much happier with Blender since I did that. Now, if Blender's your first program that you're learning in 3D, just leave it. Make your choices later down the road if you want to switch or something. Just leave it, because the tutorials will be a lot easier for you to understand if you just leave it. I will say in my videos that it's either a mouse click or an alternate mouse click, and then that way it doesn't really matter which way they're doing. Anyways, that one seems to get a lot of attention in Blender, which probably goes to show that, like I said, I think their mouse clicking is kind of weird to start with, but that's just me. Next button is this Emulate 3 button mouse. Now, if you've been watching my videos here streaming or any of the tutorials that I've done for Game Institute or lynda.com or whatever, that button gives me fits, and it's because I tend to switch between my Wacom tablet and the mouse kind of on the fly as I'm working. Things like sculpting and texture painting in Blender, I'll use a Wacom tablet back and forth. And Wacom tablets kind of force you to activate this button. And here's what that's going to cause. I'm going to go over here to my my mesh real quick just to show you why you might want to care about that. If I go to edit mode here, I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to find just a, let's do this. Can we see? Yeah, we can see that. I've got seams on this, so it's hard to see, but I'll click on that edge. See that white line there? That's an edge loop. And what I did was I Alt-clicked, so Alt and mouse click, on the next edge loop and line, and it selected that whole edge loop. That's a big chunk of Blender. It's just that little action, selecting edge loops and then adding 2 edge loops. If I come over here, back to user preferences, and let's say I turn that guy on, I'm going to save that, and then exit back out of this, and I select that same edge, and right now I'm holding down Alt and mouse clicking. Hear it? Nothing happens. Yeah, you can't work that way. That's not going to work for you. You're going to slowly go insane and die if you do that. So under user preferences, that guy really should be off. But when I use my Wacom tablet, so now I'm using the pen as the mouse, and the third button on the pen is kind of lost at that point, then I have to turn this on. So if you've been watching my videos, you'll see me coming back in here on and off. I wish there was a hotkey for it, but as far as I know, you can't set up a hotkey for that. Only these guys over here. We'll get to those in a second. You can't set up a hotkey, so I always have to come over here and turn it on and off. Anyways, that's the issue. So yeah, let's see some others here. This one, Orbit style. I have it on turntable, which honestly I think is the only way to go. I'm just rotating around. That's what the turntable's called. If I go back over there and, here, let's do this real quick. Let me, oops, grab the wrong thing. Let's do this just so we don't have to turn that on and off all the time. There you go. Now I don't have to go back and forth. But if I turn on trackball here, and now start moving this around, it's dependent on where you grab on the screen, and I find this to be completely disorienting, this trackball type movement. So, and I want to say trackball is the default. I really don't know because I changed it so long ago. But you can see I can't even function with that trackball feature. I don't like it. There we go. Okay, now we're back. But that, anyways, you could change that. Let's see. Any of these others that I've changed? I'm trying to hit the ones that I've actually changed. I think that's it. Over here are all of your different key commands, and trust me, there are more than you could ever believe. I haven't changed many of the key commands, and not because I haven't wanted to. I think I've been on record many times of saying the keystroke settings in Blender are dysfunctional. There's just no excuse for some of these keystrokes. If Control Alt Shift C is one of your keystrokes that you're using a lot, I don't know who came up with that. That really should have changed a long time ago. At this point, we're probably married to it because people are so used to it they use Blender. I don't think you could change it. But man, some of that stuff is messed up. If I was using Blender and I wasn't making training videos, I would change some of the key commands right off the bat. But they are what they are. Here's what I wanted to show you though, is under something like 3D view, which is, that's where a lot of the common stuff we have, like rotate view, dolly view, zoom view, move view. These are all really common keyboard shortcuts that we use. And you'll see that all of them, every single one of them, has something assigned to it mostly. Now, that's not one. I'm sorry. Wait a second. Let me find one that doesn't. Yeah. Okay. That's right. That wasn't a period, was it? No, that one was. Okay. Mostly, they have something assigned to them. And if you scroll through here, well, first of all, it's a good thing to look at when you first start, because you're going to find stuff in here that just isn't documented much. And they're not all called something that you might recognize. So it's a good thing to spend a little bit of time in here and just start looking around. Things like view, pan, like right here, you can see there's a whole bunch of keyboard shortcuts for that. Weird, but there is. And if you go over here, say under like let's see, where are we at here? Window, no, not window. How about grease pencil? That's a good one. Yeah, grease pencil. Here you go. So even grease pencil, something like the call pie menu, you can see that's DQ, DW. Those are really helpful to even know that there is a key command, because some of this stuff isn't in a menu anywhere. You can only access it through a key command. So I mean, that's pretty neat. Plus, there's this Add New button, so you can click on this and basically just map a new item. If you go to Add New, you'll see right now it's called None. You come down here, give it a new name right here. You give it a new key. Now, chances are you're going to wipe out an old key, but that's okay for a lot of these. A lot of these we don't use. And you can make yourself a new key. So, I mean, that's pretty helpful if you run across something where there's a key. And I'm trying to think of one that I've made. I have made a few new keys for some stuff. Trying to think. Anyways, one of them's not coming to me. But if there's an action that you do a lot, just make a new key for it. If you write over an old key, whatever. You can always fix it later. So really neat that you can get in here and tweak those settings. So that's all under input. Let's move over to, was it interface? Yeah, interface. And again, I don't remember which ones of these are the defaults and which ones weren't, because I'm kind of used to the way I have things. But there are a couple things. The splash screen, if that annoys you, you can turn it off right there. That's that little picture that shows up. Also, the manipulator size, I've changed mine. So that's your manipulator right there. And if you change the size, so for instance, this guy, let's go, there we go. If I change the size, you'll see you can make it bigger or smaller. I think by default, I want to say it was a lot bigger, like about that. And mine I've made really rather tiny. And that's because it seems to always be in the way. And I know I can turn it on and off, but I don't like turning it on and off. I just want it out of the way, so I've made it smaller. The handle size, you can change that. Those are the, I'll just wiggle them there. You can see the handles over there. Mine's about 25%. And the hotspot is where you can click to access those. It's kind of like how big it is. So if your aim's really bad, you can change the hotspot. Also, this rotate around selection, that one, which I want to say is not on by default. That one, again, goes back to being totally dysfunctional, I think, when it's not on. So for instance, I'm going to turn that off. And now when I rotate, I don't have anything else in the scene. Here we go. Let's highlight something. There we go. When I rotate, see that selected vertice there starts to go, here I'll zoom in. It starts to just go off the screen. But if I have rotate around selection, now this guy is basically in the center of what I'm rotating. I don't know if that makes sense, but it rotates around that selection. And I find that's just a good way to get your bearings when you're rotating around. I didn't know about that button for a long time, and I really struggled with the viewports when I was learning Blender because things were just flying all over the place. I couldn't find anything, and that'll keep everything nice and calm. I don't think I've changed anything else in here. Oh, cursor depth. That's one. If you don't have cursor depth on, it's the 3D cursor where that comes in. It's not just the 3D cursor that it affects, but that's why I use it. And here's how it works. Let me turn it off. Remember good old 3D cursor? Here he is. When you're first learning Blender, this is probably the biggest difference in Blender. Is the old, what the hell is that thing hopping around on my screen? I've never seen anything like it. That was my idea. And that 3D cursor, when you're learning Blender, and after you've learned Blender, can get kind of annoying because you're clicking. We've already probably flipped the mouse buttons at this point. So you're always clicking, and this guy's just in my case, it would normally be a right click, but no, that's wrong, a left click. But I'm right clicking. And if I want to click this guy over here and snap it to my object, so see right there, you'd think that thing's laying right on the object because, I don't know, that's probably what I want to use it for, is to snap something on my object. I don't want to just snap it somewhere in random space. However, that's exactly what it wants to do, is click somewhere pretty much in random space. You can see that for some reason it just seems to just go somewhere out there. Well, if you click on cursor depth, then it will always snap to whatever mesh you're clicking on. So let's say I want it right on the top of that little curve piece here. Let me be kind of lazy. Right on the top of that curve piece, all I do is click, place it, and it is right on the top there. That's cursor depth. That would get my top 10 things you really must change in Blender. And I think by default it's off. Pretty sure it is. All right. I think that's it under interface. Now under editing, I don't think I've changed anything. I haven't found anything in here that is... Yeah, I haven't changed anything in here. Add-ons we're going to come back to in a minute. Themes. Now this one's kind of fun, and I have had friends that have come up with their own themes. The Blender interface, like Max, Maya, and all other interfaces, really relies on this totally dark gray, whatever. That dark gray interface kind of took over about like 6 years ago. It used to be that interfaces were light gray, and you could actually read stuff on them because it was light gray with black writing for the most part, or light gray with white writing on it. See? Black writing, white writing. And Max, Maya, Photoshop, Illustrator, they all had light gray. Something came along and some genius came up with this dark gray idea, which I'm sure has something to do with not being distracting and framing and user interface and so all sorts of stuff. I can't see the stuff on the dark gray, and by default, Blender is a darker gray than what my interface is, and I've tried to lighten it up so that it's not noticeably a big difference for you guys watching the video, but I can't see the writing on the dark gray. So I changed it, and I can probably tell you where it is. It's where's the light gray? Menu? Is it? It's not that one. It's not that one. I don't remember which one it is. Here. But it's one of these up in here. I don't know where it is. But I changed it. And I never looked back. And I don't care if you all like the dark gray. I hate it. Anyways, you could change these colors. So you can click on these different colors. You could change them to a different color, and your interface menus will change. I'm looking for something that. There you go. That's a good one to test on. But see, if I click on this color right here and change it, I could change them all to, well, here, dark gray. Let's change them to dark gray. See, that's about the default setting. You can't read that, folks. Come on. We'll make it a little bit lighter just so you can see how it works. We'll tone that down a little bit. There we go. And now I've changed the color, and if I was to save the settings, it would save that color change. So it's something, nifty. You can also change off the shaded. I know that kind of bothers some people too. So, anyways, you can do that all in here under themes. So next up, oh, by the way, you can choose things like 3D view. I can click here. Here's all my 3D view settings. There's tons and tons and tons of these in here. So here's your image editor. There are a lot of them. By the way, Blender, lots and lots and lots of colors. Some of these there's just too many colors. File, set where you want your temp folder to be. So you can see mine's under the local temp on C directory, but you can change that here. So if you want your temp folder to be something other than default, that's great. Here you can change where your textures are. I haven't done that because I moved my textures around quite a bit for different projects, but you can change your texture folder. And somewhere here, not seeing it, it's right in front of me. Oh, save preview images. And I don't think that's on by default, but that makes it so that you have a little image with your Blender file, so it kind of gives you a clue of what the Blender file looks like. Yeah, it takes a little bit more space, but it's not a big deal. I turned that on. Oh, and autosave temporary files, this one, you could change that timer. And you can see mine's really low. I think the default's much higher than that. I did that because I kept blowing Blender up when I was learning it. Not so much anymore. Blender's plenty stable. I just kept blowing it up because I kept hitting the wrong button. And so you can autosave every once in a while. But, so, that one's a good one. And yeah, and then under System over here, this one, where's the one I'm looking for here? Okay. I hope I explained this one right. The system, let me jump over here. When you're using cycles, so if I go to cycles render here, and I go to, not that one, if I go to rendered, there we go, then, and I don't have mine set up here to render. I'm not going to go change anything, so my textures aren't going to render here. But you'll see as soon as I move this, watch this number right here, that time, which is pretty quick. So that's what you're changing. By default, Blender runs off your CPU. Most programs do. It's not a big deal, but Cycles really takes a lot of processing. And you can set Blender up to run on your GPU, which is a big deal. You probably want to do that if you have anything close to a decent graphics card. And since most of us are gamers, you probably have a pretty darn good graphics card in your system. And so if you can change it, I would. Now, it gets a little tricky because every graphics card kind of starts to look different in here. You can see I'm using a GeForce GTX 760. It's not anything special as far as a graphic card, but the GPU runs about 10 times faster than my CPU when it comes to moving things around in the rendered view. And if the cycles part doesn't make sense to you, just trust me, you're going to end up using it anyways. So the other settings, let's see, I have mine set to CUDA. If you're using an ATI card, this looks different. I don't know what it says here, but it looks different. And you need to check your card here. You can see I only have one card, but if you have multiple cards, you can choose which card you want to run it off of. And there's another setting in here somewhere. Which one was it? If I stare at this for a second, I'll find it. Was this? No, it's not that one. I'm not seeing it. I thought there was a second setting in here that got chosen. This is your filtering. This one I usually change. I think by default it's off. That's going to make this take longer to render, but will look better. I'm not seeing it. I could have sworn there was another setting in there. And then you can change over here under camera. This area right here, that area, which you won't see by default, is linked to those settings right there. So once you change those settings, you get these choices. And you can see here, see under device CPU, I want GPU. And did you see how much faster it took? I don't know if you noticed the numbers, but it used to be 129, now it's 81. And see how much faster it computes? That's just because now I'm running off my GPU. So I would think you'd want to change that. It's just a default setting. It's pretty nice. Okay. I swear there's another setting in here, but anyways, look it up, and it'll tell you how to set that up. Because it is different for each graphics card, too. You're going to see different settings depending on the graphics card that you're using. Okay, last one is add-ons. And this is probably the most fun area. And once I discovered this, man, there's some really helpful stuff in Blender that by default is turned off, and I don't know why. So I wanted to show you, and this was originally what people were asking me, is what do I have turned on in my add-ons to get more functionality out of the user interface or tools or a lot of other things, animation, whatever. Here's what I have turned on. Now these get turned on and off, but here's what I have turned on that I like right now. This dynamic spacebar menu 3D view, dynamic spacebar menu. I'll undo this so you can kind of read it. But if I hit space, by default when you hit space, usually just a little menu comes up to search. Now I have to click on search to get to the search menu. But if I just hit spacebar, I get all this stuff automatically comes up. So it's kind of like a pie chart menu. And you can get this other ways, but that's really nice. I don't always use them, especially when I'm doing the videos, because not everybody has this set up, so it doesn't really do me any good. But I really like using that when I work by myself on my own. Next one is Bolt Factory. Undo that one so you can read it. And Bolt Factory, I'll show you where it's going to show up. It's under Add. Wait, wrong thing. Let's go to Object Mode. It's under Add. Oh, Mesh. There it is. Add Mesh Bolt. And what it does is it's going to make a bolt. Okay, let me turn this cycles render off here real quick. There we go. And there you go. It's going to make a bolt, and there's lots of different settings for this. They're right down here. You can see all sorts of crazy settings for it. But usually I just chop this bottom part off, and that's a pretty nice bolt. So you get it free. Most people just don't know that it's there. There's also a bunch of other stuff there under Bolt Factory. Anyways, you can play with it. Also, extra objects. Undo that guy. And the extra objects show up under here, extras. And you get diamonds, simple star, step pyramid, honeycomb, teapot. That's for the old Max users there. And I'm not even sure I know what that is. I don't think I've ever. Oh, a Menger sponge. I never even looked at that one. That's for testing objects. These are nifty little objects. I don't, none of them are particularly functional by themselves. But let's look at the honeycomb. I like the honeycomb one. These are not the easiest little shapes to make. I mean, that's going to take a few minutes to make that, and they're free. You get all sorts of little settings here, so you can change the number of rows if you want. To make them bigger, cell diameter, all the things you'd expect to be there are there. Edge width, you can make it all crazy, small thing. But for little sci-fi stuff, it's really neat. I like that. It's nice of them to give that to me. Should have made it a default setting. All right. Scrolling down here, I have this one's on by default, I think. I want to say that these two are already on. 3DS format and BVH. I don't use either of those formats much anymore. Import export, I think FBX is turned off by default. You can correct me if it's not. But I have it turned on. I mean, if you have that off, you're crippled. So you want to turn that on. That one, same thing. I think that's on by default because I don't remember what that is right offhand. But that one's on by default. The import-export UV layout, this thing's really important. So you want to have that on so that you can export your UVs to Photoshop. And I don't think that's on by default. Again, someone correct me if it is, but I don't remember. There's OBJ. I think that one's on by default. So insert polygon. This one I have turned on. That one shows up under your tools, under polygon. Loop tools. This one shows up under... Good question. Where does that one show up? It shows up under... give me a second. Here it is. It's W, and it's right here under Loop Tools. And it's all stuff that you can already do, but they're all right there. And if I remember right, it's I think from here down is not available. But Relax is really nice. And that's under Loop Tools. We'll do a whole night on those loop tools because there's some really cool ones. Here's Mesh Relax. I don't know why that one's not in the default settings, but that is here under W, and then it's down below. That's going to relax vertices and so forth. Pretty important. Object Add Chain. This one's a nifty one. Add, I don't remember where it shows up. Where is it? Go back to object. Add. I think it's right here in front of me somewhere. I'm just missing it. The curve. No. It makes a chain. It's really cool, but now I don't know. I don't know where it went. I might be looking in the wrong spot. We did the add chain there. We did the add chain in a previous stream. It's on. I just don't remember where it is. Is it over here? Add chain. There it is. It's here. There it is. It's in its own little spot here. But you click that guy and you get, I'm just going to make a chain here real quick. You get a chain, and as you would expect, where'd my, I lost my, there's usually settings right down here, but it's not showing up. No. Anyways, you get the idea on how it works. Obviously, makes a chain. But I like it. It's free. Cycles render engine, that has to be on to get to here, but I think that's on by default these days in the newer versions. And those are the ones that I have turned on. So, but there's a lot more here. Some of these I haven't even looked at. You know, like grease, scatter objects, cloud generator. I haven't even looked at these. They sound really cool. 3D print toolbar, that's one I'd be interested in. So, you know, look around in there. There's all sorts of nifty little things going on to look at. So that is going to do it for tonight. User preferences. Get in there and start digging around. Anything that you change, save your original settings before you start. Just say save user preferences so the default's there. It'll revert to default, but if you get your user preferences set up the way you want them, make sure you save it so that it loads the way that you like it. All right. Well, that is going to do it for tonight, folks. We are back on tomorrow at... Silent pause while I check, because I don't remember when we're on tomorrow. 9 o'clock in the morning, so that's 9 a.m. Pacific. What are we calling this? Daylight savings time now, I guess? Anyways, 9 in the morning Pacific time. And 11 in the morning Pacific time tomorrow. 2 different streams. And the 9 o'clock stream is on basic sculpting, which is just the basic tools in Sculpt. So that's a beginning level one. And then the 11 a.m. stream is on relaxing UV vertices and elements. So it's using all the different relax tools and the Sculpt Relax in the UV editor. So those should be fun. And that's more of an intermediate version there. All right. I will see you all tomorrow. Good night, folks. Have a nice one. Bye.